American Apparel is a topic that I am excited to talk about because this has to be one of the wildest rises and falls that I have covered on this channel. Back in the 2000s, you might remember, it was considered one of the fastest growing and most promising fashion brands with, I would say, a lot to respect about it. The company was started by Dov Charney. Technically in 1989, he borrowed $10,000 from his parents, dropped out of college, and moved to South Carolina to start a wholesale t-shirt business. Well, after about 8 years or so, without gaining much traction, he moved that operation to the West Coast, specifically Los Angeles, and sort of re-established his identity. American Apparel t-shirts stood out from most of the others on the market at the time because they were typically tighter and more fitted, they featured simple styles without prominent logos, and maybe most importantly, they were manufactured domestically. Believe me when I say that a lot of their advertising emphasized the fact that American Apparel clothes were ethically made in America without the use of sweatshops. It was arguably their biggest selling point. At their peak, they had around 10,000 employees that on average were paid higher wages than the rest of the industry and were provided with certain benefits like medical insurance. Over that first decade in Los Angeles, American Apparel became the largest t-shirt manufacturer in the country, while expanding product offerings to include all sorts of clothing for men, women, and children. I guess disco pants became one of their best sellers. I will admit that I'm not familiar with disco pants, but I do remember these hooded sweatshirts with the white zipper and strings that they also became known for. By the end of 2007, the company had a valuation on the stock market of around $1 billion, and that is when everything completely started falling apart. By 2015, the company had lost almost all of its value. It was trading at less than $1 per share and in danger of being delisted from the New York Stock Exchange when it filed for bankruptcy. And then, only about 13 months later, if you can believe it, they filed for bankruptcy again, so clearly there were some issues happening here. I would say that second bankruptcy marked the unofficial end of the brand as we all knew it. The intellectual property, along with some assets, were sold to Gildan, who is also known for selling t-shirts, and previously identified by American Apparel as one of their primary competitors. From there, all the retail stores were shut down, along with their Los Angeles headquarters, and American Apparel was reduced to an online retailer that no longer manufactures clothing exclusively in America. In this video, I think it would be interesting to explore the impact of this company while identifying what I believe to be 5 of the biggest reasons behind its decline. Starting out with aggressive expansion, which usually seems to mean trouble. Originally, American Apparel started out as more of a middleman, connecting the manufacturer and the retailer, but very early on, they started manufacturing their own clothing, and in 2003, they started opening their own retail stores to sell their clothing directly to the customers. That first store was logically opened in Los Angeles and was quickly followed by dozens of others across the country and in 20 other countries around the world. By 2009, only 6 years later, they were operating over 280 stores that now accounted for most of their sales. Around that time, founder and CEO Dov Charney said that he believed they could ultimately reach 600 to 800 stores worldwide, so these were aggressive plans. In short, they invested a lot of money, some of which was borrowed, to expand their presence and to become more vertically integrated. Every year in their annual report, they would start out by describing themselves as a vertically integrated manufacturer, distributor, and retailer. Now, it can certainly be debated that the company was not prepared internally for such a complex operation, or that these store openings were not properly researched, but I think the biggest issue here is that the company was so fragile that the smallest complication can become a major setback. And that is going to lead me straight into the next reason that I'm simply going to call 2009. To be clear, there were already signs of trouble before 2009, but I would probably consider this right here to be the true turning point of the company. Just looking at their sales graph, it is clear that this is where their growth phase ended and things started leveling off. It is also the first year comparable store sales were negative, meaning on average each store was selling less than the year before, and it is the last year that they opened more stores than they closed. When looking for reasons reasons behind all of this, well, the obvious one would be the recession, right? It was the height of the Great Recession, so people were not shopping as much, and that was bad news for a vulnerable company like American Apparel. In March of that year, they were already in danger of defaulting on one of their loans, so to avoid bankruptcy, they sold 18% of the business to a private equity firm called Lion Capital for about $80 million, helping to stabilize the business and reduce their debts. Then, to complicate things, in May of that year, they paid $5 million to settle a lawsuit to director Woody Allen for using his image on a billboard without his permission. Then, to further complicate things, in September of that year, they were forced to fire about 1,600 employees that were unauthorized to work in the United States, which represented a significant percentage of their workforce. What I'm trying to say is that 2009 was a bad year for a company that could not really afford to have a bad year. Another reason behind their decline is competition. I mean, during a recession, things become more competitive, right? The same number of companies are trying to attract a smaller pool of customers. But what I'm looking at here is fast fashion. Companies like H&M and Forever 21, for better or worse, have impacted the industry by offering a rapidly changing selection of lower quality, cheaper clothing. I recommend these other videos I made if you want to hear more about fast fashion, but it is commonly made possible by outsourcing production to other countries that pay lower wages. And if you remember, American Apparel was almost the exact opposite of that. They were 100% manufactured domestically by people who receive abnormally high wages. So you can see how that can make it difficult to compete, especially during a weak economy when people are seeking out lower prices. Likely, at least part of the reason American Apparel started reporting losses each year, and those losses forced the company to borrow more money to continue operating, leading to higher interest expenses that worsened the losses, and that became a dangerous cycle. By the time of its first bankruptcy, their debt was reported to be at an all-time high of $311 million that they were simply not able to keep up with. Okay, I'm going to warn you that this marks the end of the straightforward financial portion of the video, and the rest of it is going to be much more scandalous because American Apparel became one of the most controversial companies out there. My next reason behind their decline is their marketing. From the beginning, American Apparel has been associated with aggressively edgy yet realistic advertising. They at least claimed that many of their models were not professionals, but rather personal friends or even employees of the company. They were depicted in more natural settings that were not meant to be glamorous, and honestly, it was an effective way to stand out from most other fashion brands. But many people have argued that these advertisements are simply too sexual and have crossed over into the territory of being distasteful. Some of them have featured adult film stars, while others have been banned in the United Kingdom. If you want to see the kind of stuff I'm talking about, I recommend this article from Time magazine called The 10 Most Controversial American Apparel Ads. The company developed a very explicit, sexualized image that was complicated by its eccentric and allegedly inappropriate CEO, Dov Charney, which is actually going to be the final reason on my list. Dov Charney might just be the single biggest reason behind American Apparel's success and its failure. I mean, he started the company and served as CEO for 25 years. It would have never existed or become a global brand without him. However, there is such a wide variety of allegations against him. Most notably, there were multiple sexual harassment lawsuits filed against him in 2005 and then again in 2011. Just to give you an example, one of those accused him of conducting job interviews in his underwear. The following year, he was accused of choking someone who worked for him and then calling him a gay slur. I don't necessarily want to sit here and outline every accusation. It's just not pleasant or meaningful for this video. If you want to learn more, you might want to check out the Hollywood Reporter article from 2014 called Dov Charney's 10 Slimiest Moments, or perhaps the GQ article from 2015 called 9 Disgusting Quotes that former American Apparel CEO Dov Charney allegedly said to female employees. Yeah, the fact that these articles exist is evidence that Dov Charney is at the very least a controversial figure that to many people has hurt the image of the brand. He was actually the photographer for many of these edgy photo shoots, so you can see how all of it came together to detract people from buying the brand. I do want to point out that to my knowledge, he has denied all of the serious accusations and has never been legally found guilty of anything. However, in 2014, the board of directors fired him from the company that he had created, which I imagine must be one of the most embarrassing things that could happen to someone.
Dov was fired for violating our sexual harassment and our anti-discrimination policy. He was also fired for misuse of corporate assets.
After being fired, he was very upset about it. He filed multiple lawsuits against them before attempting to buy back the company in a bid that was rejected. The whole thing was a mess, but he did go on to start a new company called Los Angeles Apparel that, as you might expect, follows similar principles of domestic production by people receiving higher wages. And in 2022, I guess he personally filed for bankruptcy, not affecting that company. To summarize, American Apparel was a cool, promising company that had so many things go wrong. They aggressively expanded, arguably at the worst possible time. They have faced some tough competition and may have gone a little overboard with their edgy brand image that was promoted by their seemingly problematic founder and CEO. When looking at this list, I would say that the common theme here is risk. If the company had been a little more conservative with their approach, relying more on their products and being patient, they might still be around in their original form. But instead, American Apparel exists today as a wild case study with a mixed legacy. Let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts about American Apparel? Did you think they were cool and then turn on them at some point? Do you continue to buy stuff from their website, or maybe you never even thought much about them before today? I will admit that whenever I hear the name American Apparel, the first thing I think of is that 5 Seconds of Summer song, She Looks So Perfect, where they mention it in the chorus. Tell me if that's the case for you. And finally, do you agree with the reasons on my list, or do you think something should be added or subtracted from it? And any other thoughts you have about American Apparel or anything else in this video, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.